there's a real crisis of meaning for young men right now. There's a sense of purposelessness. We're not working towards anything. There's nothing that we can rally behind and feel like our efforts are focused behind. Men no longer occupy the role of provider. So it's very difficult for them to offer any kind of utility. And so they're really struggling. Like, what do I do? What am I doing here? I think young guys don't be ashamed of your anger. This is something that you should transmute productively. This is a natural emotion. Don't think that it's not. Media tries to make you feel like a bad person for feeling normal things. But learn how to productively and alchemically transmute that into something that actually benefits your life and your life. But to learn how to become more of a person, you need to learn how to connect with yourself as a human being. A couple of friends are talking about the Senna documentary. He often talks about the state of auto-tourism, where things are happening so quickly that there's no way that the brain can consciously register what's going on. So the only way to kiss the apex of the corner is to switch off entirely and let whatever else it is flow through you to execute that activity. And that's when greatness comes. It's when you learn how to unlock that aspect of yourself. I studied as a lawyer. I just realized that this was not something that I could continue for the rest of my life. I knew that financially speaking, it was not enough to get to where I wanted to go. I found it, my soul was rejecting the vocation. I was just like, but there's something deep within me, something, just get out. You need to do something else. You need to run. You need to start something of your own. And I did that. My grandfather advised me to do that. But that's the really tough thing to do, is to leave the security of a guaranteed employment, to go out there on your own.
Quote from your Instagram: I built my life through the leverage of the digital world, but there's a time to leave it behind and embrace the analog world that is good for the soul. Can you explain that a little bit deeper?
Absolutely. I think we've been disconnected from our physical selves by being just completely thrown into a digital reality that sort of has removed us from our instincts, and particularly as men, like we're sort of we're demonized, right, for being who we are, in the sense that any display of will or force is deemed like predatory, or it's a problem. It's you sort of you're treated like a defective girl in a way. And what I'm trying to get people back to is a more sort of vital experience of life, like getting back to grips with what's real. Straight off the bat, right into the deep end.
Well, it's good. I mean, you don't want to spend 20 minutes wasting around before we get into it.
But dive into it.
Yeah. So I guess then, the challenge is that, and we kind of spoke about it before, it's like you don't want to be that person that then sits here and is saying that from a point of, you've got what you've done, you've created your wealth and you've done that. Now you're kind of doing it. Do you think still people need to attack that from the first point, leverage that digital world to unlock the ability to do that second half of the quote though?
Yeah. I'm not taking away from it. I think the internet's been an absolute godsend for younger generations, because it can be a rocket for your existence. If you do it right. And I'd recommend treating, your Instagram presence or whatever like a digital resume, or an unofficial one. And I did it sort of by accident, really. I learned how to monetize, almost like as a fluke, right? I was around people who were doing this already, and I sort of picked it up through osmosis, right? But I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun sharing things that people connect with, or they resonate with. It's for me still an engaging activity, but I still have my dream of moving off to my little island build that I'm working on right now. I'm building a home out in Norfolk Island. It's a idyllic landscape, and you can see my artworks in the background there. And I have this dream of kicking back and just creating and just sort of leaving it all behind. At heart, I'm a creative. I'm an artist, but I'm rooted in the pragmatic. I understand how to get ahead through life right now. That's through the digital space.
Yeah, which I guess is challenging, because it makes me think of obviously everyone. If you've listened to a podcast before, has heard that whole fisherman sort of story where someone goes go work in the city, make your money, and then return back to retire and live that life. And then someone says, "Why don't I just live that life to start with?" But I think there's so many more layers to that, in the fact of you still have to that's not considering purpose and what. Going fishing every day. Now, while for some people they go, "Fuck yeah, sounds great." Yeah. I don't know about you, but I hear that and I go, "Nah, I need something more still." So I think skipping that phase of life of attaining something and, pushing towards a purpose is still so important, because that's what gets me through the day-to-days as well.
Yeah. And I think there's a real crisis of meaning for young men right now. There's a sense of purposelessness, that they're not really needed anymore. They're not part of a grand narrative. We're not working towards anything. There's no, I mean, believe what you want about it, no moon mission. There's nothing that we can rally behind and feel like our efforts are focused behind. You don't feel like you need it, even in a familial sense.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the advances that we've made in, gender inequality, perhaps in wages, men no longer occupy the role of provider. So it's very difficult for them to offer any kind of utility to women. And so they're really struggling. Like, what do I do? What am I doing here? What's this all for? It's like midnight, you're sitting there by yourself, you just closed YouTube, you just sat there on your Jack Jones, and you're like, I'm going to be up at 6 tomorrow. I'm going to go to my dead end job, and, it's not enough to save anything. It's enough to, pay for the groceries and maybe rent, But what am I doing here? What's this for? So, let's speak on that today and see if we can help some people find their purpose in life.
And I guess even more like so you go like labor is becoming less of a need, which then you could, at least men would have had the argument that we're, due to our physical abilities, that even if we weren't earning as much, that could have been something they could hold themselves to being like, that's my purpose. But now you go, well, you got all this machinery, you got all these things. Sure, yes, it's still majority. You go to the mines, mainly blokes, you do all those sort of things, it's still mainly blokes, but there's the less physical sense in the world as well, which probably taps into it a bit also.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is another thing people are struggling with, is that they're aware of the fact that their value is running to zero in terms of their effort as a function of inflation. And that's very difficult to wrap your head around. It's an inescapable trap if you can't get yourself in assets to ride that wave up, like previous generations could. And we've created this sort of intergenerational inheritocracy where if your parents didn't get ahead, you're kind of snookered in a sense. We hear it in the media all the time about people relying on the bank of mum and dad, but even that's running out, So it's a tough gig. I mean,
so where do you start when you're that you don't have mum and dad?
Well, this is the thing. For that guy who's trying to make it on his own, you're going to need to be fearless. And you're going to have to go out there and be willing to accept a greater degree of risk than you perhaps anticipated going into it. Right now, like, there's no safe path forward. It's gone are the days where you could go to university and you could get easily into a profession and get yourself gainfully employed and paid a decent enough wage to get ahead and to buy that nice little white picket home. I started on that route, so a bit of backstory. I studied as a lawyer. I graduated. I worked in the Land Environment Court. In a junior capacity, nothing major. It's just like part of the Supreme Court. Administers, property disputes and developments and that kind of stuff. And I just realized that this was not something that, at a spiritual level, I could continue for the rest of my life. Like, I knew that financially speaking, it was not enough to get to where I wanted to go. But it was just, I found it, my soul was rejecting the vocation. I was just like, there's something wrong about this. I'm trying to apply myself. I'm a disciplined person. Like, I work really hard, but there's something deep within me. Something, just get out. You need to do something else. You need to run. You need to start something of your own. And I did that. My grandfather advised me to do that. And I'm glad I listened to that. But that's a really tough thing to do, is to leave the security of a guaranteed employment, the default, the safe path, to go out there on your own. You have to be a bit of a cowboy, to be perfectly honest. And it's tough, but that's the way it is.
You also, they could have gone two different ways. Is that if you didn't have the conversation that you did have with your grandfather, and there's plenty of people that maybe they have the conversation with their friends, parents, or whatever it is, and because you're then having to try and change the way or rewire their beliefs around that safety as well, is they may start to then convince you into the safety. But you were also lucky that you had that conversation with him, because, had he turned around or someone else had turned around and had the other thoughts, then you may have gone the other way and we're not here right now.
They pushed this vision on you because they lived it, right? But that world is gone. And I mean, this is why we're talking about what's going on in the digital space, because this is really the only realm in which we can, get ahead. And it's complicated. It's not simple. You're subject to the whims of popularity and the winds of views. These are things that sort of ultimately, a lot of it is beyond your control.
Do you look
to
good
be
enough?
honest. So
Attractiveness as well on social media.
Yes,
You know, the
superficial
online world.
culture.
Yeah.
It is capital. It's social capital. But that's what you're going to learn how to create. It's like, how am I going to create social capital today? We're in an attention economy, whether you like it or not. And it's just, you got to learn how to play by the rules of the game that you're stuck in. You can't change the game. You can't get mad about it. You just have to get good. It's really that simple.
Yeah. Which is, you know, a lot of people, it's like we were talking about, say, like the different, say, maybe the politics of the world to some extent as well. You go like, this is the way it is. Like we can have as many conversations as we want about it. How much do those conversations change it unless you're having the conversations or with the right people of the right influence and getting in the right circles? It's like sitting on a couch talking about it, a mate from school probably isn't going to change it. Just deal with it and work with what you've got.
There are deterministic forces beyond you that are beyond the force of really anyone to control. And it was interesting reading the memoirs of Napoleon, some of his private letters, and he's talking about, you can tell which way the wind's blowing. But there's some ill-defined sense of the direction of the future that he just basically hoisted his sail to and ran with it. And that's a really good figure for people to look to, because he was someone who had his aggression setting on maximum. The ultimate cowboy, the Ubermensch, basically. But he had this mentality of a plan executed aggressively today is better than one delayed until tomorrow, right? It may not be the perfect plan right now, but at least you're doing it, getting started. And the man from the galloping horse isn't going to notice what's wrong with it. And you need to have that same kind of vivacity and energy. You need to just throw yourself in there. And it might be scary, but you know, this is what you're going to have to do.
Yeah. I find like, you know, anyone listening may, depending if they've come from you, but like it, you know, my journey starting building a nutrition app at the moment, to exactly what you just said there, I always frame the term like being naive. Like I've accepted the level of naivety that I have to have in order to do the thing because I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
That's a good point. Actually, you got to be like intentionally dumb. Like you got to. A lot of people that I know that did really well, you know, they didn't have, you know, tertiary level education. They rode off sound common sense. They had really good with people. Well, they understood people. But oftentimes you've got to be too dumb to see where you can go wrong, or to see where you can fail.
You overanalyze otherwise, don't you?
Because you can think yourself out of doing things, and you can become your own worst enemy. And I think a lot of intelligent guys, that's the only thing that's in their way is them. It's like learning how to get out of your own way. It's cliche, but if you can be sort of intentionally naive about what you're doing, it's a really good thing, to be honest. Yeah,
which is a strange thing, I guess, to portray to people that like try and be dumb. It's not being like intellectually
not to
dumb
other people.
necessarily.
Exhibit
but like,
competence, be competent in what you're doing. But in terms of your own internal reflection, that's the position you hold.
Yeah.
So they're two different things.
Because if you looked at every situation you're going into, like an engineer building a building or something like that and doing the structure, you're going to look for every reason why that building will fall down. But if you look into it like, oh, I'll deal with that as I go, which is not how you kind of
engineering
trained.
is a little bit different because you're subject to the laws of physics. Like,
yeah.
You don't have a cavalier attitude with that. You can plan that out.
But no, sorry, that's what I'm saying as well, though. Like, you don't want to have that mindset necessarily going into business, and you're able to, but it's breaking free from that when maybe all you've been taught is to have that structured mindset. You have to analyze, be like, well, where could you go wrong? It's like, sometimes it's okay to just be like, I'll figure it out when I get there.
Yeah, and there's a lot to be said for learning how to switch off.
Yeah.
And making it unconscious. A couple of friends are talking about the Senna documentary. I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
As in the McLaren driver, the famed F1 driver. And he was famous. Like, he often talked about a state of autotelicity, where things are happening so quickly that there's no way that the brain can consciously register what's going on. So the only way to kiss the apex of the corner is to switch off entirely and let whatever else it is flow through you to execute that activity. Fighters will talk about that. Anyone who's like, when I draw, I create best when I learn how to get out of my own conscious mind and make it an execution of the unconscious. And that's when greatness comes, right? Is when you learn how to unlock that aspect of yourself. I don't know what it is. Like, some people describe it as a divine. Everyone's got a different name for it, but whatever it is, like learning how to harness that is,
Yeah.
the golden source, right? That's what you want.
Yeah. I think from like, say, seeing it like the creativity sense is like you can't think creativity. Like you can't grind out creativity. You just, creativity happens. Like you have to be in that. It's like when people say the shower thoughts is the prime example. Having a shower, oh fuck, there we go. Like you weren't trying to do that. A little bit different to, when you're trying to do a said task at work. Like you have to try. The effort has to be with that task right there and then. Creativity is kind of these things that flourish and come to you, gathered by the books you read, the people you talk to, your external environment a little bit as well. Which, to your point earlier, like is so important. Why people need to get out and explore things, because that's where you may get the stimulus that then provides that creativity for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I try and practice creativity to a certain extent, because there's a certain level of mechanical skill that comes with it. The experience is kind of analogous, really. Like it is quite similar to business, right? In the sense that you can't be completely switched off and just scribble everywhere. There's got to be some measure of conscious planning is what it is that you're doing. But finding that balance. And I think that the only way to really refine the unconscious so that it is a more powerful force to flow through you is to live a more virile experience, to live a more embodied experience. What we started talking about, we didn't really nail down, to be honest. Well, I didn't nail down, it's a failure on my part. Is learning how to sort of unlock more of who you are through lived experience. And a lot of guys aren't living life right now. They know they're not. It's hard. It's expensive to live life, to get out there, to become more. But it's something you've got to do. What
do you mean when you say live life? Because some people hear that, I just got to party more or something like that.
Well,
I'm sure it's an element, but
I'm going to disagree with a lot of entrepreneurs here. It's like, well, you want to see me at the club. I think that's an anti-virile stance. And I think that's a life-denying mentality. You can do both. I mean, you can work 6 days a week and still find some time to just have some fun, let it out.
Yeah.
And I think that you've got to strike a balance between what's called the Apollonian and the Dionysiac. And you can analyze this at a societal level. You have Apollonian societies that tended towards order, too much so, and they stagnate. A rules-based order it's too constrictive for the average person. They're less likely to procreate, less likely to create, and a civilization will fall apart. There's nothing that sort of innovates it. A Dionysiac culture is dynamic. It's full of life. It's engaging in a lot of these activities. And a good sort of vivid example is the comparison of Athens and Sparta. Sparta embodying the Dionysiac force, the sort of virile masculine force. You see King Leonidas.
Yeah.
That's a manly man. That's a virile man. But then the Apollonian was the Athenian man who was may have been the helot. He might have been the slave who was tilling the fields. Ultimately, both met their demise, just in different ways.
Yeah.
But there was dynamism about one and not so much about the other. But you've got to learn how to embody both forces within yourself. You've got to constrain the Dionysiac. And you, for the most part, be Apollonian, be ordered, be disciplined. Like I'm a very disciplined person. But to learn how to become more as a person, you need to sort of learn how to connect with yourself as a human being.
Yeah.
Not a human doing, human being.
I guess that a good, you arguably one of the hardest workers in the world, Elon Musk or whatever, in his book, and you see it on his socials even. I think only the other day, like I saw something, he talked about how much he plays video games or something. It's like, now, for some, you're saying get out and do things still as well is important. But you can still see the man that works that much and has a mind across all those sort of things is still playing the odd video game.
Yeah.
For some people, you're going out to the club or whatever it is, or going to the beach, playing golf. Like it's finding ways to do it. But I think also you just get, because we see on social media, go, and you get stuck in your algorithm, which is telling you to work harder.
Exactly, yeah.
And then, so you're even though you might see 50 people in one day that are telling you that same message, but what you miss is their other message that they posted the day before that was saying, I work hard, but I still had a little bit of time here.
I'm going to be controversial. I think you shouldn't aspire to be the hardest worker in the room. I believe you should learn efficiency of work and learn how to create impact value to your time. So you can go hard and then switch off. Go hard and then switch off. You're not I don't think it's a masculine state to be locked in a state of endurance. When you think of, say, the lion on the savannah, he's not running a marathon. It's a sprint. Kills the gazelle. He's well fed. He's well fucked, and he lives as the king of the jungle, right? But that's because he has impact value for his energy. Learning how to generate that about yourself is difficult. But say in the arc of an entrepreneur, it's going from, say, selling your time for whatever business you might be running as a service, and then selling a product, and then eventually transitioning into becoming an investor, where perhaps you just make one purchase in a day, and maybe you exit that trade a month later. Who knows, whatever it is that you've done. But because you had all that stored energy and capital, there was a lot of impact value to that time. It might have just been a few minutes in a clip, but that was enough to earn more than 10 men in a lifetime. Yeah, there are people who can do that. I'm saying it's not necessarily me, but that's the aspiration. That's where you should be aiming for. It's very easy to slide up yourself into a slave mindset with a lot of productivity content, and you can dehumanize yourself rapidly. And that goes back to what we started with originally, is like, we need to get out of a trap of dehumanizing ourselves through what it is that we do. But we need to learn how to get more out of what it is that we're actually doing, so we can live a good life. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's the end goal, right? Is you don't necessarily start a business for a number. You start it for freedom, like more abstract concepts. Like, I am really sick of listening to my boss. One thing that really got me when I was working, in law, is that they'd be nitpicking every aspect of everything you did. It'd be, say, the suit you turned up in, they'd be like, trouser length, a little too short. We're going to lengthen that for tomorrow. And you're just like, really?
How much is that
really the biggest issue for that? Is that really impacting my work? Yeah. And just little things like that grind you down to a point where you're like, fuck this. I'm starting a business. I'm going out on my own. Yeah. And you kind of need to store that energy up. Like, get angry. I think young guys don't be ashamed of your anger. This is something that you should transmute productively. This is a natural emotion. Don't think that it's not. Media tries to make you feel like a bad person for feeling normal human things, but learn how to productively and alchemically transmute that into something that actually benefits your life and the life of everyone around you. Yeah.
Well, I think Jordan Peterson, he says it really well. It's like, you should be a monster, just learn how to control it. It's that sort of mindset. Like, you've got this within you. Just, don't take it out on people wildly on the street, sort of thing. It's like you said, channeling it into being a beneficial part of your life, which is, once again, a massive superpower of the man, that you do have that, but blokes don't know. Well, I guess, like you said, they're demonized for having that. So then that becomes even more why they're feeling a little bit lost, because they've got this energy. They're being told to feel your feelings. Oh, but just not that feeling, because that's not good.
Exactly.
And you go, oh, so just pick which ones.
I like what Peterson's trying to do. He's transmitting the Nietzschean ideal, but he's constrained by the culture war that he's locked in, where he has to present a politically correct view of it that I don't think a lot of young guys fully resonate with. It's not the same world that he grew up in, and it's not the ask the nice girl out and get married a month later kind of world that he grew up in.
Just buy flowers sort of thing.
And they don't understand. Well, it's kind of ironic for a psychologist to not really understand interpersonal social dynamics, for at least how our generation interacts and how that's changed, or how social media has changed how we interact. But how we interact with women is very different to how he interacted with women when he was younger. So,
well, listen, the dating landscape is arguably confusing as well, because then I guess people have all these rules that they feel like they need to have coming into, because I've got my standards and I've got all these sort of things. And then you go, well, it's pretty hard to maintain these standards when we have social media. Therefore, people are interacting, liking photos, and being attracted to that person. Like, you can't help that because they have that exposure.
Social media, it was catastrophic for desensitizing people to each other's value. And that there was a sense of mystery that it destroyed as well. That we have, or at least I was a pre-social media age kid. At least when I was still at school, like, we went to house parties and no one really knew each other. So there's this excitement of like, who am I going to meet? What's out? You had no idea what was out there. what people could look like.
You might have heard about this person, but like
there's more magic about it. There was a sort of intangible sense of excitement that sort of surrounded every engagement.
Yeah.
Or anything you now it's just you go out and everyone just looks like depressed. It's like someone sucked the life out of the room. Oh well, I've seen better on the internet. Like I guess I'll make do with whatever's here. It's like that's not a good place to be mentally.
No,
like, it's not healthy for anyone.
And then you have to realize that people are thinking the same about you. Because they look at you and go, well, you're not a fucking 10 out of 10, so I don't want to deal with you. And, so then no one gets anything.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, it created a really hypergamous environment where it's become very distinctly transactional.
Mm.
We're just talking about this in an objective sense. We're not judging anyone. It's just like how technology shapes the way people relate. It's very simple. It's pretty obvious that in almost like commodifying interaction, that was a natural consequence. The people with the most followers, the most likely to get the most dating options. It's kind of as simple as that, really.
Yeah.
So everyone is now locked in this eternal conquest of, trying to establish their value in the eyes of others.
Yeah.
It drives a lot of people insane. And it's very difficult for a man to compete on that basis because a lot of the intrinsic aspects of masculinity do not translate well visually. You can't really articulate what it is to be a man through an image.
No.
And typically a lot of the things that make you appealing as a man cannot be conveyed through social media. It can be very strange things like how someone feels safe around you in your presence. The way you hold yourself in a room, you command a room, your energy sort of fills that room and dominates it. Those things do not translate at all to Instagram.
No
one can pick up on that. But what would have worked really well for you in a nightclub, say, just falls flat on its face on Instagram. So it's very difficult to compete on that basis, particularly when, men are visual creatures. So it's a very simple game for girls. It's like, just look pretty. That's it. For a guy, you've got to be like of utility to your community. You've got to be respected. You've got to be wealthy. There's added dimensions to your character beyond just how you look. There are expectations that are really hard to meet in a world that's making it increasingly difficult to meet those criteria points.
Yeah, it's just getting further. The goalpost is getting further away to become that person that the women are looking for as well. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. Society does a great job of simultaneously amplifying desires and making it difficult to meet them.
And social media.
That's why people are going insane.
The mega magnifying glass of that. Like
exactly,
it's just hugely distorted that reality even more.
It's a petri dish of insanity. That's what it is.
Yeah. Which is interesting. I think, like, I don't know, maybe it actually might have been yourself that put something up as well. And it was like, if you just put your phone down, like the world feels a lot more like 2005 or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like it's incredible.
To a point,
Yeah. You can't fully, but like I've even been doing this. I've noticed like my screen time's way down on, phone. Because you can get in the trap. I'm like, but I got to post clips, like, so I got to spend time on my phone, and you can lie to yourself, I think, a little bit about how much you need to be on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But when I've spent less time on it, I'm like, this is refreshing. Like you do have that hope for some of these things that we're talking about here that you kind of go, nah, I'm screwed. It does feel a little more possible, but still hard.
Like social media tends towards extremism. And media in general, really. And it also plays to negative tropes because typically pissing someone off gets more clicks than offering something positive. So you rarely see a positive vision of the future, and you unfortunately see a lot of the horrors of the world instead. But again, if you just put the phone down and look outside, I just look at the sea and I just remember the waves keep crashing. They've been crashing there for millions of years. And I remind myself that they'll crash long after I'm gone. Yeah. So there are some things, you got to remind yourself of what's permanent in this world sometimes. You got to anchor yourself to something real.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about in terms of living a more physical experience. You get that immediate sense when you get the sense of danger. Like I used to be a skateboarder, right? You throw yourself at a big stair set. And then, there's the constant threat of like pancaking yourself into the ground, from a great height, from landing this complex trick. But it's sort of, it honed your instincts and your mind, and it sort of, in a way, it's just such a beautiful rush, right? It's some kind of threat from the environment, but you're just anchored in your physical. Even if it was a bruise, right? You left the session after like, landing this trick and whatever, all this effort that went into it, but you walk away with, a limp and you're missing a few bits. And, there's something hanging off you there.
It's like a sense of freedom attached to that.
But you have this, when you look at like the bit of skin hanging off your knee, whatever, and you're like, yeah, but we landed that 360 flip down that 10 step, didn't we? And you get this sense like we really did something. We bled for something, and that feels good.
Which is that purpose thing as well. Like even in those, while that may not have changed the world, it still felt like purpose in that moment.
Exactly, and that's it. It's like learning how to find something which, don't put the pressure on yourself of thinking you can save the world. But try and find some way of creating some meaning for yourself within the sphere of influence that you have.
Which is like that concept of ikigai sort of thing. Like it's your, like, what you can make money from, what you enjoy and what the world needs, those sort of things as well, like all coming together. It's like you don't have to solve all world problems, but it probably is going to feel pretty good if you're leaning into solving a problem for people. Yeah.
I mean, say with Helios, like the focus with that brand is metabolic health. It's not wildly sexy or exciting, but downstream of metabolic health, the greatest or the leading causes of death globally. Tens of millions of people are dying. So whatever small dent you can make in that feels good. It feels like something you're making a tangible impact to some degree. So you got to make sure that what you're doing. I mean, I don't know how people who do crypto scams and all the rest of that, how they sleep at night. Sure, you've got the numbers in the bank account, but I mean, can you live with yourself? Some of these people can. Psychopaths, sociopaths. They're missing an element of their life, and they'll probably forever hate themselves. And they won't even be consciously aware of it, but that will manifest itself eventually, and that will be their undoing. So people are always the architects of their own demise. Just got to let it play out over time.
Well, you see that so many times where people, they rip people off for so long, and then eventually they get done for fraud and they're in jail. Like it's, these things do full circle. Or who was that? Was it the FTX guys? One of the crypto guys, like he, so like comes around eventually. Like if it's that too good to be true, you're like, and they know that they've pushed the boundaries, it's going to come around full circle.
Well, there's an added dimension of that. So he had Intel connections, and he was used as a bit of a Trojan horse to basically subvert and undermine the crypto space with him. And it was intended to implode. That was the goal. But the goal was to reduce faith in the system itself. And I think that it succeeded in that mission. He'll get a slap on the wrist. I'm sure he'll get an early release and be on his way. But if you look at his parents, big Democrat donors and some affiliations. So there's always more to the story.
Play a bit of connect the dots there.
Yeah, this is real politics, right? I like this kind of stuff.
So what is like, so you're saying that move was to try and make people not like crypto or trust the whole crypto and decentralized system quite so much.
What is a financial system built on? Trust. Without trust, you have nothing. So that was the attack vector. And, they don't have to ban it per se, but they can make it difficult to get money on or off exchanges. I've run into issues with that for no reason whatsoever. Provide all my tax records, everything like that. And they sort of said, well, we're basically going to have to close this account for whatever reason. So I had 24 hours basically to liquidate my positions and get out for no reason whatsoever. I'm like, okay.
Right.
They were pretty cool about it, but they were saying they were getting pressure from some credit card company. So I'm not going to speculate as to who it was, but...
So is that like, so you're saying the, like an example, like what do they call the platforms that you're trading on? Like your trading platform has said you had that, it got shut down. They're the one delivering that message or?
Yeah. So that was through SwiftX.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's difficult to get money off exchanges in Australia. Like you can't do it through Binance. So that was the way to get it off, basically. I think it's just like they immediately get suspicious whenever there's relatively large volumes of cash moving around. Because they expect anyone who's like 30 to have zero in their bank account. And it's always mildly suspicious if anyone has anything. And that's a bad state for society to be operating from. It's this default assumption that if you're not living in poverty, that you're doing something wrong. And that's really unhealthy for young people to wrestle with, going forward. And they think that the only way to make it in life is to sell heroin. There's a negative association with wealth. Correct?
Which as soon as you see someone like yourself drive your car down the street, you always hear a mum or dad be like, oh, drug dealer, something like that. That kind of is the rhetoric that children are told.
And the ironic reality of this situation is that a lot of the great fortunes in the world were built on things like that. I mean, look into the history of the opium trade. You know, the big families that were engaged in that. The Delano family that went on to become the Roosevelt family made their money in trafficking to China.
Beautiful.
So the most powerful people in the world made their generational fortunes that way. Not all of them, mind you, but I mean, it was a big part of the British Empire.
Yeah.
You know, there's a really good book by Gary Webb on the Iran-Contra affair, and it's how the CIA was basically dealing cocaine. And it's backed up by all the court cases where it was prosecuted, who the key players were. And some of their operatives got caught up in the investigations, and some of them were swept under the rug. But it was pretty damning, and it showed how, more or less, the American government was directly complicit in the cocaine trade and rewiring that money to pay for weapons to fund uprisings in various countries. So, you know, dealing drugs to fund terrorism, right? I mean, that's your power structure.
Sexy title.
You know what I mean? And it's funny. And then they turn around and then judge their citizens for, you know, misreporting their taxes or something.
Yeah.
And you're just like, really?
It's okay for
Really?
us to do, but you? No.
Yeah, rules for me, but not for thee.
Yeah. So then I guess with the crypto, where do you see, I mean, there's obviously, you can see the bigger corporations trying to get on with their central banking digital currencies, which is kind of like, try and make people believe that it's a decentralized crypto, you know, that sort of world, use a similar framing.
Yeah.
So they think it's crypto, but it's not really crypto in that sense. Where do you see all that playing
sort of like
out?
preconditioning, I guess. Yeah, and you even in the behavior of Bitcoin. Like, I'm not an expert. I'll leave it at that. But it was sold as digital gold, and ostensibly it is not acting like that right now. It's not the crisis hedge people thought it was. Look at the price of gold relative to what Bitcoin's doing right now. Two very different stories, right? I do think it was introduced as a way to inure the younger generations to the coming financial system, which frankly is, and it's terrifying, really. Let's be honest. It's basically essentially dictated system of allocation. And you can look to examples of where this has played out before. A good example would be the Soviet Union in the 1920s, where central planning went catastrophically wrong. You know, in a given year, I think it was 1922, the inflation rate was 800%. You know, the Gosbank just blew up the system and it just destroyed the citizenry. But you could argue that was, I mean, what the system does is its purpose, and more or less that communist model is designed to impoverish and destroy the average citizen. It's not meant to work. Like, the failure is baked into the system. It's a system of control.
Like, works on the dude at the top. Works for him.
It's actually, this is what people don't get, and they constantly make criticisms of capitalists. And I think someone like Rockefeller is a capitalist, but no, they were communists. And what was it? What's his name? John D. Rockefeller. He majored at Harvard University with a political science degree, I believe, and he did a major on communism. They were definitely instrumental in funding the rise of the Maoist faction in China and funded the communist uprising there. But the way to think about it is that a communist system is the perfect system for the monopolist, because they have a captured economy. They control whatever aspect of it is. You know, say it's the oil industry. There can be no competitors because the state will stamp them out. It's a state-backed monopoly. And then when you this is very difficult for people to wrap their heads around, but the wealthiest people in the world are heavily invested in bringing about a communist global world order. And that's the pain of what you're living through now, why a lot of things don't make sense. That's why at a social level, things are very confusing. There's a color revolution going on right now. But the long and short of it, that's what's going on. That's what they're working towards. And it's not to say that you can't even flourish within that system itself. There was a flourishing black market within the Soviet Union in bread, you know, things like that. But prepare yourself for a world of artificial scarcity as constrained by the limits of a ambiguously defined carbon tracking system. We probably should be a bit careful. I don't want to get your podcast banned for denying certain things, but that's
the waterline may stay there for a few hundred years. Is what we're saying.
Maybe
like your apartment here, probably not going to get flooded.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why is Bill Gates buying waterfront property?
Yeah, he's not the only one.
And Obama.
Yeah.
So we know the gist. That's the thing. I don't think this is going to work because everyone's already figured out the lie before it's even started.
Yeah, there's enough people that have wrapped their heads around it.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but enough. Because but I think even people that deny it, they probably still know there's an element of truth. They just try to deny that.
Well, I don't want to believe. That's the other part of it. And a lot of people will fight on this and having not read anything on the topic, they'll deny anything you say because they can't conceive of this reality. They don't want to. And it's the fact that they don't want to is why they're fighting, and not because of the factual basis.
Yeah. Like it would be scary if that was the reality for them. Then
you've got to be gentle with those people, and I think that there's a lack of sophistication in the way that a lot of these arguments are put across. You don't beat people over the head with facts. You lead someone to their own conclusions.
Yeah,
I remember watching a masterful barrister in the courtroom, and he never said anything explicitly. He would always leave a trail of leading questions to which you would reach a natural assumption yourself. Never made it explicit, but because at a psychological level, you're more likely to believe something that you come up with yourself than what you're told. So the art of real persuasion and conditioning is setting that frame for people. Well, they come to a conclusion, but they don't know why they did, but they think they came to it themselves.
It just makes sense.
And a lot of those conclusions that people have reached are life-denying philosophies that are destroying their lives. So you've got to be really careful to you got to analyze every position you take on every issue and ask yourself why you believe what you believe. Because the downstream consequences of your belief build the world around you. And that's a meta concept. That's tough for people to wrap their heads around because they're often not critical of what they believe.
Yeah.
You've got to be anchored in objective truth, but you've also got to be ready to decamp based on new facts.
Yeah. And I think it's powerful there, like you're saying, like there's so many, you ask heaps of these different people and we all live in a different reality because of our thoughts, or our observation of a different thing, our perception of a different thing based on who knows what that led you there, or maybe you have one extra piece of information. It was interesting that just hearing trying to, people would take the persuade word in a bad way, but that's how you could use that in a leadership in business. You could use that as a sports coach and whatever. It's if you have this stubborn, egotistical striker in soccer, you're not going to tell them, do this for X reason. If you can get them to come to the conclusion that passing the ball once in a while will be better for them and they'll get paid more.
You actually just nailed it there. The best form of persuasion is leadership.
Yeah.
The case is made for you, basically. And this is something that guys aren't really taught, and they can't figure this out. But there's a real dearth of leadership in this one. I mean, women are crying out for it. They want, at an unconscious level, for you to lead. And they might not admit that explicitly, but you've got to figure out how to be assertive, decisive, set the frame, and do so in a healthy way that's not authoritarian, but it inspires someone to follow your example. You shouldn't have to impose your ideas by force. People should adopt that position because it appears to be the best one.
Yeah.
So that's the essence of leadership.
Yeah.
And this goes deeper than just, in a business. It's not just business. It's interpersonal relations. It's how you even conduct yourself in a general sense as you walk down the street. But cultivating a sense of leadership is very important. And it's not about domineering people. But this is the masculine essence that must be healthily embodied. And no one really explains how to do this or whatever. It's just sort of by vague accident that some people pop up and develop these skills. Yeah. Josh and I, we were talking about this before. We hang out. There's another example of a leader there, and he became a leader through his craft. And we, fighting, BJJ, for anyone who doesn't know who he is, Josh Saunders. And it's drawn us into each other's orbits, because we're both sort of leaders in our own right. And it's really good for us because we get to sort of analyze what kind of example we want to set, or really break down what it is we're here to do. And you need to find people who are on the same path, the same level, who can inspire you to become a better leader yourself.
Which comes with a level of openness as well. Like it's a true leader then would also have that ability to listen. And I think, I reckon it was maybe in David Dieter's, like The Way of the Superior Man. I reckon he talked about this, and it was like, say from a relationship point of view, you have your partner and she's telling you she wants to do X, Y, and Z, or you should do X, Y, and Z. And it's not to say that like the controlling sort of person would just be like, no, I'm doing it my way, whatever. But the real masculine man would like take that opinion, absorb it, think about it, and make a decision based on all information and choose whether that would be the right decision. If you're always saying yes to her, well, she'll notice that, and that is not masculine at all. But if you're saying you then come to the conclusion that you do actually agree with her, but it's not just because she said it, you're not just a yes man, like it's a genuine conclusion.
Well, I mean, true leadership should know what decision to make because she comes up with that conclusion herself. She knows how to act. And
they should know in her head as well.
She doesn't want to act out.
Yeah.
Right? It's that simple. And yeah, it's difficult for guys imposing boundaries. But doing that in a healthy way is very important. Like, because otherwise you're going to get walked all over. Because you don't have as much leverage as you used to. So you got to get smarter. And guys are getting trounced psychologically. They don't understand the psychological domain that they occupy. They're anchored in material things, logical things, but matters of the mind are often a mystery to them. So, girls are a mystery to them. They don't get it. Right? It's just sort of, but why doesn't she like me? I make X amount of money. It's like, bro, that's not it. It's because just like very vague things, like your body language is your ability to make someone feel heard, or there are so many things, or your ability to project strength in a healthy way, or to provide an abundant zone for them to step into. It's like there are so many other intangible factors to consider that might seem illogical to you, but this stems from a more nuanced understanding of like base psychological imperatives. And like, again, going back to it, we're in a hypergamy environment. You need to sort of get used to that and figure out how to operate in that space. Understand the game. Don't get mad at the players. Just figure it out. And it's easy for content on this topic to immediately get siloed off as a problem because it's considered manipulative or whatever. But ultimately, everyone benefits from this if we understand each other better and we learn how to meet each other better in the middle, right? It's not manipulative. It's not persuasive. And it's certainly not hating people for being what they are instinctually. Like when we're honest about human nature, it's not pretty. This is the Dionysiac we were talking about before. We need to be realistic with human nature. And when you are realistic about human nature, I mean, it can seem a certain kind of way. People say, oh, it's misogyny, it's misandry, it's this, that, the third. But you're just being pragmatic, being realistic. It's like, well, this is how people are. Don't get mad about it. Just how it is.
And I think then also some people, maybe those conclusions come in as well when, like you said, we live in a very extreme world where it's this end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum. So someone hears that a bloke should take some more control, and maybe they don't look into it a little bit deeper, and they just go,
well, control sounds like a charged word, right?
Yeah, like grabbing and moving and doing that. It's like, no, it's just taking lead, like being...
But we've also stepped into a gynocentric frame where certain words have become apropos. Like, you can't say that. Or at least you feel this twinge of guilt in saying that word because, oh no, bad thing. But no, it's not necessarily a bad thing. You have control over your property. I have control over this property. I want to beautify it. I don't want to desecrate it. I don't want to there's no negative connotation to it. But you got to like disentangle yourself. Like they've tried to make so many words toxic. And what that does is that changes your worldview slowly. So you become like feminized by proxy. It's not necessarily atrazine in the water supply. It's the ideas that you're putting in your head. And it's the frame you're holding. And masculinity is a frame. That's a very hard thing to articulate, but it's like a set of positions you've adopted across every sort of experience of your life.
And like you said, the masculine man, you feel that when you're in their presence as well. Like you can't just look at it and see it. It is their actions. It's how they walk into a room. It's those sort of...
Yeah. It's very difficult to draw it on a piece of paper. And this is why a lot of people are struggling with it. Like, guys don't know what to be anymore. They're told what they're not to be. They're told what's toxic and what's a problem. And I was reading the other day that some guy who ran 1,600 kilometers for charity,
Ned Brockman,
was a problem. Because it's toxically masculine that you put in effort. At a certain point, you just got to sit back and just ignore that. And just
you're a fucking idiot.
The man ran 1,600 kilometers for charity.
It was like over $2 million for homeless people.
It's about the most noble thing you could do. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You can listen to too many people. That's the other problem. You take a lot of opinions seriously, but you just really shouldn't.
Yeah, and I think that taps into you don't have to be liked by everyone or as well. Like it's, if then his next decision is, but someone thought that was toxic, therefore I have to do X, Y, Z. It's like, well, that becomes an issue in itself. Like, whereas you look at that and go, nah, ridiculous, move on. I'm going to keep doing my thing because I know that I'm leading the right path.
Yeah, I mean, we're taught that Caesar was a tyrant. That he was, but we remember Caesar. But if you look at his actual practical actions, what he did, not only in the conquest of Gaul, but when he came back and he realized that the population was locked in indentured servitude and homelessness by function of financing these wars. And so he set about reforms for interest and capped it at 100% of the capital loan for. That's what designated him as a tyrant. But that actually helped the average person who was crippled by debt. So, great men of history they've been revised, and their memory has been destroyed. So there's a movie about Napoleon too, right? They just tried to shit on him and just destroy his legacy. And you see that with all the major Hollywood productions right now. They killed off James Bond. They just killed off a Joker apparently in the latest one. I didn't see that.
I haven't seen it because I heard it was so crap, so I didn't go.
Exactly, yeah, because he became like an incel icon, right?
Yeah,
a symbol for the disaffected.
Yeah,
it's like, well, don't create a disaffected class if you don't want to create. You know what I mean? Like, it's sad that you've created a desperate situation for people and then punish them for it. That's the cruelty of the system that a lot of people are really
like. We did this to you, therefore we're also going to punish you for doing it to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Double slam.
There's a Darwinian. It's like how in dating, women will punish weak men. And I like to think of it as like a Darwinian enforcement at an unconscious level. It's not an intentional decision to do that. It's like a biological imperative. It's like we've got to weed out the weak genes. These can't be allowed to propagate. So we need to rigidly enforce this to ensure that only the best prosper. So from an evolutionary perspective, it checks out, makes sense, probably a good thing. At a personal level, it's going to really fucking hurt. But, sometimes you learn how to not take these things so personally.
Yeah. Well, then, you said, that's self-reflection opportunity then to be like, okay, well, I've got things to work on. If I'm constantly not an attractive man, then it's maybe it's not there.
Maybe there's something I should be working on.
It's like when someone's like, everyone hates me. I'm like, maybe you're just a prick. Like, I don't think the whole world will hate you. There'll be some people that will.
I was nearly about to make a joke about 109 countries, but we'll keep you on YouTube for now.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's only early days. Let's be careful. I guess then, obviously we're talking a little bit before about, especially before we turn the record on, housing is an interesting conversation. The boomer generation had it a little bit differently, and maybe they haven't quite wrapped their head around why that's the case. So what to do? Like, how, you said property is a great way to leverage and get yourself to these higher levels. How does someone get their hands on their first property then?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, they have lower deposit requirements. That helps to some degree. But if you were to take the median house and the median income, and you were to say for a hypothetical 20% deposit, it would take over 40 years to save up. Right? I mean, the maths don't math.
You're like, there's no point of trying.
And by the time it gets to that point, there's another zero on the end of the property. Statisticians can articulate that better than me, but you're entering at the very end of an intergenerational Ponzi scheme. Life is always hardest for those entering a Ponzi scheme late. But it's not to say that you can't get ahead. You're going to have to be very clever about it, though. In terms of like an asset that is likely to appreciate, I mean, we don't have anything else in Australia. That's the problem with our economy. We have the same level of economic complexity as Equatorial Guinea. We have a mining sector, yes, but it's heavily centralized in dynastic families, and that's not going to pass anytime soon. So a lot of wealth creation comes down to non-productive means like investment in property, development, things like that. We have a services-based economy. So basically 70% of jobs in the economy are like, barista type jobs. Like that's going to be very difficult to parlay into investing in property because it's capital intensive, particularly when you get to a development level and you're building houses and things like that. Material costs have gone parabolic. Even developers are hurting right now because some of them can't afford to complete the projects that they started when they entered into a fixed contract and they're locked in at a certain price, but materials have just gone parabolic. So, even where you think you can make a hell of a lot of money, you've had like 3,000 bankruptcies in the construction sector in the last year, which it's going up, right? So that's a problem too. But yeah, I would strongly recommend don't buy Gucci belts, don't buy. I know it's trite to say, save whatever, but I didn't spend money on the flashy things or the fun things until I'd secured the bag and made sure that I had a roof, that it was paid off to like the first one. My first property was paid off in full. Might not be the wisest decision, but it's like absolute security, right? And there are certain tax benefits for your first home, primary, well, that kind of stuff. So secure those things first. It's going to be very boring, but then you've got a stable base. And a lot of people, they come in late, right? They'll see the Lambo and the flash cars and stuff. Yeah. But that's the stuff at the very end, and that's discretionary spending. That's not the sole focus of what you should be focusing on. You should absolutely be focusing on building equity. But long term, can that equity even build it? Can prices continue to rise forever? No one has an answer for that. But mathematically speaking, you'd think that they couldn't, because at a certain point, asset prices need to be tethered to the productive capacity that underpins it. That is thrown off by foreign investment, and you do get, say, Chinese investors sneaking in through the big four, like KPMG facilitates a lot of international purchases of Australian property. That distorts the market a lot. That's a problem. That's hard to deal with. But there are still areas that are undervalued. And look, in anything you're investing in, don't necessarily look at the price. You want to understand the value proposition. And so there are still growth areas like Brisbane, Perth. They're still growing. They've got room to run for a little bit at least, I think. But yeah, be modest in your aspirations. You're not going to be buying your penthouse for your first. It's going to be a bit disappointing. It'll probably be an area in the middle of nowhere as well. But yeah, perhaps, you put your deposit down, you rent it out, you negatively gear it, so you're getting a bit of a tax concession as well. Little things you can do. There are still affordable properties for 500,000, which is still a lot, right? Yeah. But that's an achievable. Let's say that they ask for a 10% deposit. If you had to if you had to stake your life on this, I believe you can make 50 grand. You can make that happen somehow. There's ways to. Even if you, ask mum and dad, don't be ashamed of that. If they can help, ask them.
Or living home for a little bit longer than you maybe want to. All these little things.
Yeah. I lived at home while I was at uni. That wasn't ideal, but it set me up. So I had very low expenses for a long time.
Yeah.
That helped a lot. But yeah, you're gonna have to play it smart. You're gonna have to do things that are just not fun.
Well, that's the hard game when you're saving for the deposit, but if you don't live at home, you're still paying these high rental prices then as well. So it's like you're saving in and around that. You're almost like, how many people can we fit in the house to try and make this affordable?
Yeah, and also if you're in a share house, how difficult is it to be productive if you're in a constrained space and you're competing? There's a lot of noise, and it's difficult. Your environment definitely defines productivity.
Yeah,
I would say this: that life is hardest at the beginning. Your journey is never harder than when you're starting out. And
we're talking like preschool, like just finished school sort of age.
Well, it's like bootstrapping from maybe even transitioning from a job into a business. Like that transitionary phase.
Yeah.
At the start is the hardest. There's a lot of things to figure out. A lot of things are uncertain. A lot of big strategic decisions to be made. But after that, it gets easier.
Mm.
It's like this: the difficulty curve is inverted, and once you get some momentum, then things will work out for you. But it's learning how to get through the sticking point, getting to that escape velocity.
Mm.
And that might just be getting your first home deposit and being able to service that loan.
Mm.
But you should make that your focus, get that done, and just disregard everything else. Beyond that, I mean, there are other things to invest in right now. Silver is on a good run. The last 18 months, I think I'm up about 50% on 55% on silver. These are consolidatable gains. I would recommend against a mindset of like a moonshot mentality, which a lot of people fall into.
Yeah.
They think that the only way to get ahead is to gamble. Like there's some big speculative play. There's 100x here or something. Let's say you find that 100x, and you put 2K into it, and things go to plan. You got 200K. Well, that's one play, and that might do you for a year.
Mm.
But can you repeat that? Can you continue to double down and keep making that happen? I don't know. Maybe not.
Mm.
But what you can do is you can start a business with a consumable product that would be a 50x, might be a 100x. I know early on, so the G-Duck boys, they were next door to our last factory. And they were a lot of fun. They're funny guys. But they were just basically repackaging things from Alibaba.
Mm.
And they were getting a 50x in terms of what the ROI on every batch they were getting in. So you can find your moonshot in a product that people can buy every month as well. There's so many ways to play this where you can make it something that is reliable. And that's what you need, is because if you want to get ahead, you need to be able to play the financial game too. Like, how am I going to be able to get finance? Like, how am I going to get loans?
Mm.
You make a moonshot, the bank's going to look at you and go like, cool. Like, you're going to lose that all next year.
You got lucky sort of thing.
Yeah. And even, I know guys who are traders who make millions, but still run into that problem because the bank's like, nah, it's risky.
Yeah.
You're self-employed. You could lose it all tomorrow. We're not going to loan really anything. I was astounded by that. I couldn't believe it because these are some of the most disciplined and I would say astute with attention to detail individuals I know, and still they were knocked back. I'm like, wow, like that's hard. That's tough.
It's probably the one time where maybe not the one time, but where that 9 to 5 goes, I got a big upper hand.
They do. They have a higher borrowing capacity because of the trust basis that underpins it.
Even though they could still lose their job tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's still an element of that.
And not only that, I mean, sometimes the education system sets you up for failure. Like, you can graduate into a field where there's just a massive surplus of candidates.
Mm.
And, I came into law at a time when there was a titanic surplus of law students, just not enough positions to go around. And unless your dad knew someone who was a partner of a law firm somewhere, it was very difficult to get an internship. It was very difficult to get any kind of toehold on the ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So be prepared for that too. So look at a student cap, look at the amount of positions in the economy. That's something to think about before you go into a degree.
Yeah.
It might be 5 years of your life. So that's the way to make that less of a gamble and more of a strategic decision. Is figure out the supply and demand dynamic of that field. Because I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I did really well at university. Like I won the Harry Henderson Memorial Prize for coming first in one of my subjects, and I was being groomed for a peer-assisted learning program to teach them tutorials and some of the subjects at Macquarie University, and I still, even despite getting great marks, there just wasn't the opportunities there. To be honest. Like, what I should have been doing is doing what some of my other friends were doing, which was going to the right networking events and meeting people. And, they were very charismatic, and that worked out really well for me.
I guess to your point as well, of getting out there and doing things, that's where you're finding those connections and networking. And
you know what? They were partying a lot, and that's where they made a lot of their connections, believe it or not. So
in the bathroom, lining it up, and hey, mate, how you going? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, exactly. And now, one of my friends is a big shot lawyer in New York, and was working at Minters and Allison's here in Sydney. So it's like who you know, not what you know.
Yeah. So when people look on the outside, and like you've mentioned cars now, and you've generated the wealth that you were obviously going for in the past, still obviously continue to go. how much does that actually change your life? Like how much, happiness and all these words that get thrown around, because, everyone's obviously on social media, they go, materialistic items equal happiness to some extent and all these sort of things.
Yeah.
How much does that change for you?
Oh no, like I'm a happy person now. And don't let people tell you that it doesn't make you happy. I can tell you, like, taking the top off the Corvette and blazing down the highway with your favorite music, and that does something too. That tickles a little boy, and you're like, you have fun.
Yeah.
It's a way to like augment your experience of reality in a way that it's just you get more out of it. It's just more fun. It's that simple. But there are other things to it. Like I was really frustrated with myself for years because I knew I had a lot of talent, a lot of grunt, but I had no vehicle for it to put that into. A lot of young guys out there with a lot of aptitude, and sadly they don't have a vessel for it, and that is incredibly frustrating. That can drive a man insane. But yeah, once you find that, it's not a struggle. Like I texted you at 1 a.m. last night, right? Saying I just got home from the office, like, yeah, we'll tee up tomorrow morning. No joke. But was I unhappy about that? No. That's just part of it. Yeah, we're busy.
Yeah. Things
are happening, things are moving, and when you're winning, when you're making progress, you find the energy. You're under, like, 3 nights in a row, underslept, right? Still going.
Yeah. You just like,
started off a bit shaky here when we got into it. We sort of like smooth the runway, but
yeah,
like you're gonna have to give your all. And once you find a vessel for giving your all, it doesn't matter. That's it. And then everything else falls in place. All the nice things and the environment for you improves, right?
Yeah. And I think it's like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like it's the representation of the nice car is not just like you. Well, also you were wise. It wasn't I made X amount of money. This is all the money I have. I'm going to go buy a car.
It's still a dumb decision.
Like
it's not a wise one,
but good for the soul. But also at the same
yeah.
time, like it's the representation potentially of like
not everything should be logical.
Other things in your life as well. It's like, well, if you run into an issue health wise, whatever it is, like it's you now have the funds to solve problems faster as well. I think that's what
more choices
can represent that.
And I think having a lack of choice and a lack of agency in life is what messes a lot of people up. And really what you're doing is just sort of increasing the scope of agency you have in reality. More things are possible. New experiences are possible. Yeah. And and there's nothing wrong with that. Like you shouldn't have this feeling of guilt about that. Or that you have this sort of collectivist mindset that the only way to be acceptably productive is to be an instrumentalist. Like you're only earning money to, benefit your community in some abstract manner, or to help your family, and you take some vow of poverty at a personal level. Don't be ashamed of being individually motivated. Like I want to succeed and I want to, get ahead for me.
Yeah.
And then ultimately you're a better person for it. You're free to be kind. You're free to be a good person. You're good energy. And also you sort of find joy in just giving things to people. Like when someone's struggling, you just help them out a bit. So whatever it might be, like those things, they actually mean a lot after a while.
Like you can solve more problems because you have more potential to solve problems.
Yeah, and making life easier for other people is a strange joy unto itself.
Yeah.
It's not pleasant to watch people struggle. Like it hurts me a lot to watch people struggle. I talk about controversial things all the time that don't affect me at all, simply because I give a shit. And it hurt my social media a lot. Like, and it permanently nuked my account and my ability to go into the explore page and things like that.
Yeah.
But I could not say it because you sort of feel compelled to say certain things or talk about certain things. It's just who you are.
And it's like that same, we said, like people selling the crap and manipulating people, like those crypto scammy sort of things. The same thing. Like if you hide away and don't be your true self, then you're like sleeping at night just doesn't feel the same. Like you go to bed and you're like, I probably should have said something, but I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to get in trouble and whatever it is like.
Yeah, you're going to feel, if you're disingenuous, you're going to feel dislocated from reality. Like if you're constantly being fake, you're putting on a front or you're not saying certain things to save face, you're going to pay a price in the end, ultimately. And that's a spiritual cost.
Yeah. So it's a soul sort of feeling that you can't.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a religious thing, but you have a spiritual center. You have I like to think you have sort of like multiple bank accounts, but that's definitely one of them. So you're going to be doing things to nurse the spirit, to nurture it. For me, I love to draw. I find that's a really good, almost like you can see it, right?
And bloody good at it too.
Oh,
That's
getting
pretty
there. I've got
impressive.
friends who are better, but I love it. Like it's moving for me sometimes
Yeah.
when you finish some artworks. Like, you know, it's hard to explain, but say the one behind you there. You know, when I finished it, there's certain music that I was playing with it, and it sort of imbued it with a certain feeling, a certain meaning to me. But it sort of brings a tear of joy to the eye, or something. It's something that moves you at an existential level. And it definitely felt like it changed me when I finished that artwork.
Yeah.
And I couldn't really explain it to someone who doesn't create, but that when you feel like you're home, there's a part of you that was underserved that now feels like it got some attention. You're like, that was it. Yeah,
Makes sense.
I can tell you that, you know, making money won't fill that. That you'll feel very empty if you don't find a way to sort of nurture that aspect of yourself. And the way to nurture it's very cheap. I'll tell a story. I mean, it's some my story. I mean, I'm on both sides of the law. You know that. Everyone else knows that too. But I'll tell a story from Park Lee, because I got incarcerated. Yeah. So, quick back up for a second here. You can get incarcerated without being convicted or anything here in Australia. More or less, there was this awful situation I was locked in where I was basically getting blackmailed by a lawyer and a ex-girlfriend who'd sort of worked in cahoots to threaten me that they were going to, you know, fabricate certain charges if I didn't pay them a set amount of money. And I took this to the police. I didn't care, whatever, I didn't do anything. So I went to have a conversation to sort this out in person. It's the only way to do these things all the time. And we argued, you know, that was about it. You know, he let me into the house and then he lied about it after the fact and spun a tale, and I got charged on that basis. And so you have to disprove the lie effectively. And it took me 7 months, but not before I got denied bail and sent off to prison. And you got to learn how to survive in there. So when I was just before I went into 6B, someone got killed in there. They got stabbed in the neck, and it was on YouTube apparently. So you're just like walking into a murder scene. So it's kind of like a bit stressful, right? You got to think,
big wall.
What's my survival strategy? And you're going to, you know, this part of the system. It's what's called a transit jail, where people are fresh off the street and they're waiting to be moved elsewhere. But people are very antsy. You know, they're mad, and some of them are still like hopped up on drugs and stuff like that. Extremely volatile environment. So some people try and guarantee their safety through shows of force. And I saw some guys get pumped and, you know, sent on their way because they conducted themselves like that. They were trying to instigate some issues. My plan was different. I went on the yard and I drew pictures. And there was this magical moment. I remember I was drawing, and this big, like, Muslim, like, former heroin dealing, like, gnarly dude comes over and he's like, "Whoa, hey," and he calls out to his mates and he's like, "Come and have a look at this." And then soon, like, I had all of them around, like the whole yard came around me. I was sitting there drawing. Everyone was like, "That's really cool. That's amazing." And there was this beautiful moment where people that you'd never expect would appreciate culture or art did. And there was some recognition of beauty or something that it touched their souls.
Yeah.
And then they were like, "Hey, can you draw, you know, my girlfriend, or can you draw, you know, my dog, or something like that?" So I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And so, you know, I built really good will between this, but like they liked me, and it was like a sort of this act of good faith, and it meant something to them, and it meant something to their loved ones too. And it was strange because it just created this like bubble, you know. But there's something that beauty can do, even in the darkest places.
I think it's like, you know, you travel, and what are you attracted to? You're attracted to these beautiful buildings, the architecture and things like that. Very similar sense like that.
Yeah.
I don't have to speak the language of that country to go there and be like, "That's insane. That's just beautiful." Like, you understand what went into it. You know the beauty of that thing, much like the art here. It's like that was a mutual just thing that all humans understood, that the beauty within that piece.
Yeah, I mean, the world makes a lot more sense when you understand that beauty inspires men to greatness. So there's been an intentional uglification of the world. You know, this globalist design language, a lot of flat glass, steel, concrete. The brutalist school, is it's not an organic outgrowth. And it has been scripted. You can look into things like the Tavistock Institute, which is actually a institute set up primarily for the purpose of psychological warfare. So understanding that the design language of our environment is set up by people who wage war psychologically says a lot. But when you look at, say, Vienna, the beautiful Gothic cathedrals of Germany and Cologne, that took 600 plus years to build. And even now, you have people traveling from supposedly civilized countries to admire the work of medieval peasants. Like, who's the real barbarian now, right? And there's something to be, and this is, as an artist, like, I really need to articulate the power of beauty. That there's something about, like, even like a Ferrari that resonates within a man, right, that motivates him to extreme action.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of objective principles at play that define this as a beautiful object, something that's worthy of work and effort. So you've got to preserve beauty, because this is the sort of the muse of the engine of humanity. So, I mean, that's why I love to create, but I think that's why other people should take on an appreciation of the arts and architecture. And even if you just appreciate it from a perspective of design language, just through cars or something like that, don't be ashamed of that. There's a lot of shit I see now where they're trying to shame guys for this vision of masculinity being fast cars and women and stuff. And it's like, it's always coming from guys that have never had either of those things. And it's an uninspiring vision for young men, because it's like, well, those things do strike a chord in young men. You can't get around that. I'm sorry.
Everyone wants to be James Bond
or
Batman. Like, that's
they do. So, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, it's like, it's why you look at a Tesla and you're actually not that blown away. Minus the fact it's pretty cool, the technology that, now it can go 0 to 100 like that.
Can, but do you care?
But it doesn't sound good. It doesn't feel exciting.
When you think of speed, do you think of a Tesla or do you think of a Lamborghini?
Yeah, 100% a Lambo still.
Exactly? And even though it's objectively slower, like, there's something about it that embodies the principle of speed.
Yeah.
What that is, it's this is like goes back to Plato's theories of forms. There's some sort of ill-defined essence of things. This is a deeper level of, like, archetypal understanding of symbolism.
Yeah.
And the power that symbols have on people.
Because it's interesting. And I think as well, like, we all have our own things that get us going in that sense as well. Like, sure, there might be some people that are like, I just couldn't give a shit about cars. I'm like, but look into your life.
Give a shit about something.
You would have something that excites you. And then if someone came along and did the same example of Tesla to Lambo, you would be disappointed by or not as excited about. Like, there will be something in your life that you see that, and then you could understand why people feel a certain way about
There's a highest example of your craft somewhere in the world. Whatever that might be, you go and find that and let that inspire you. Don't let it piss you off. Well, maybe let it piss you off. Sometimes I use that, like, that kind of energy, like, and just alchemized it positively. Right?
Well, that's that anger you're talking about earlier. Like, that's a natural feeling. It's going to come. Channel it.
When I first moved out here in the eastern suburbs, there were, like, other guys with supercars and stuff, and I would see them driving around. I'm like, that annoys me because that guy knows something I don't. But then that motivated me to figure out what that was, and so it was like a sort of North Star for action. So again, I wasn't mad at the guy, but I let it piss me off.
Yeah.
So this example made me feel bad.
You didn't walk up to him and be like, oh.
Yeah, this is a childish sort of instinct or whatever, but it's, again, something that can be productively transmuted. And then once you've learned the skill of, like, owning something that's difficult to obtain, you can then translate that to other things that are more useful.
So does this all kind of tie into why the island living goal?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost like a rejection of materialism. It's anti-material, right? But like, I have a foot in both camps. But the way I'd explain life over there, it's like Australia in the 70s. Obviously, wasn't alive then, but before we went insane, and before the pressure cooker was built around us, and incredible natural beauty. It's sort of like the English landscape in terms of, like, big pines, rolling green fields, but then it's got beaches and, like, it's got a nice temperate climate too. And it just sort of feels like a place where the insanity forgot. And you go there and just feel healthy. Like, there's farm to plate food, there's, everyone knows each other. There's a real sense of community, which is really nice. Like, I remember just going there and some guy in a ute just pulled up. He's like, hey, you look like you lift, and just gave me, like, a carton of eggs. I'm like,
Sick.
Awesome.
I can get used to this.
Yeah, that's good. I like this. And it's just a really relaxing place. And I've had a pretty crazy life. I've experienced a lot, so it might not be exciting for most people, but I think you appreciate different things at a certain point. And, you want to create a zone of growth as well. I mean, ultimately, I think everyone should probably aspire to starting a family. I think there's some biological drive down there somewhere.
Definitely, yeah.
And there's a sense of purpose to be found in creating that zone where that is possible. And it's very hard for young men to do that now because a house itself, like just the house, is so expensive that almost seems like an impossible goal to just have a backyard, which was the norm, 50 odd years ago.
Yeah.
So now it's just become, it shouldn't be an impossible dream. It's still possible, but just creating a zone of growth.
Yeah. And it's that whole, like, you just get this whole space to yourself. Like, I imagine you go there and the first thing is kind of just like this big, like, sense of relief. Like when you get out of the noise, like we talked about, like the noise pollution, the sound pollution, all this, you go there and it's just like peace.
There's this, it's kind of like almost the silence beats you over the head in a way. Like it's an incredibly dramatic spot. It's on a cliff top, like 270-degree views of the ocean. And massive waves rolling in, and the waves are huge. Like you got to be careful because you can get swept off the rocks. Some people have died there apparently. So like 30-foot waves, that roll in,
and just out of nowhere as well.
It's a very dramatic and violent landscape, but somehow incredibly beautiful. And I don't know, it did something to me the first time I got there. Like again, maybe I sound like a sappy. I'm not an emotional person. I'm only bringing out the meaningful points of my life. Yeah, it brought a tear to my eye. Like, it was a moving experience, right? I'm like, I've been to the worst places on earth. Like, getting locked up in Long Bay is a fucking terrible place to be. I don't, that's not my whole persona, by the way. It's just a thing that happened to me. Some people make that their whole personality. That was just one chapter of my life. But having been there, it made you appreciate beauty a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
Because when you're in an environment that's deprived of any kind of visual stimulation, your brain actually dies off. It goes necrotic. So you need visual stimulation to activate dormant centers of your brain. So this goes back to what we were talking about before with anchoring yourself in the physical, because it does actually have a tangible benefit for you that can be measured.
Yeah.
Even in terms of your cognitive function.
Well, there's a lot out there. Like, people talk, obviously, they're woo-woo sort of topics, but the grounding and all these sort of things. But it's a genuine thing, getting out in nature, feeling nature.
Well, there's actual science behind that. So in terms of like, we were talking about it before,
frequency and stuff.
Yeah, you're more or less blocking correct endocrine function and dopamine reuptake systems within the body itself. So you're sort of trapping stress through the way your body is electrically charged or electrostatically charged. So understanding that there's a nexus of electromagnetism and biology is sort of tricky to get your head around. But you're like a biochemical battery. You're as much electromagnetically intermediated as you are chemically and hormonally intermediated. And this is why I find certain therapeutics fascinating, like pulse electromagnetic field therapy and stuff like that. Great for energy levels, great for getting you healing you up too.
Yeah.
So, some of these things that sound woo-woo are just sort of explained poorly. There might be some substantive truth to it, but people really haven't articulated the actual mechanics behind what's going on there.
I think it's the person having the conversation as well. Like, they seem woo-woo because it's a Bondi hippie saying it to you.
It's all energy, man.
Like if they say it like that, you kind of like, no,
you
thank
lose
you.
People.
They say like, I saw numbers. I'm like, cool. Do you see ghosts too? Like, and so people kind of, if you attack them, like you said before, too aggressively like that, it doesn't seem aggressive because it's from a hippie, but like they like push those, like that way of living on you rather than just being like, I do this thing, it makes me feel good. Like, maybe you should try it. Like,
lead by example.
Yeah. Like, oh, okay, I'll give it a crack.
Well, that's kind of what I try and embody, is like a performative example. Like, I want to sort of live a visibly virile life, like show that there's still some spark left in the human condition. Because it depresses me when I walk around, I just see a conquered people. You see it in the eyes of many people that they look defeated. And if there's something that can be done to rekindle that flame within people, like it is your duty to do that. Because otherwise we all suffer for that. If you see a gradual winding down of the energetic battery of civilization, we all pay the cost of that. That's not something you can escape.
No. I think I remember the first time, like a few months ago when I came to Sydney, haven't been here for ages, like I said, stayed in the city and just walking the streets, like I was like, this is a painful place to be. Like just as a visitor, I was like, I really do not want to be here.
It's a
like,
hectic city.
And, you know, some people will say, oh, that's what I like to do. It's this or that. I'm like, sure, whatever. But like you see people head down, no smiling, headphones in, eyes on the phone. It's just like, I'm like, that's just,
there's a direct correlation between density of living and sociopathy.
Yeah.
So that more or less as you're forced into a more confined space, become more hostile to other people or less sensitive to them at an emotional level. And that's just because you've surpassed your dumbbell number. You've got this like finite number of social connections you can make and a proximal distance in which you can make them too. So you can't get out of the sort of primal architecture of the brain that's built for like a tribalistic way of living. Like this way of life is not natural at a cellular level. And it's not meant to be natural either. It's not meant to, like, that's what we were getting at before with the essence of communism. It's, it doesn't fit with the incentive structure of the human condition, but it's not meant to. There's no incentive for putting an extra effort under that system because you get the same result. Yeah. But that's the point. And what that does gradually over time is it breaks your soul, which is the ultimate objective. But that's, we've got to focus on finding some sort of productive vehicle for effort and some kind of way of getting something out of it too. You're not doing this shit for nothing. You're not putting in the 18-hour days just to say you did, like in some flagellistic display of like, look how dedicated I am. No one cares, frankly, because a lot of people say, they just lie about it too. Yeah. No one gives a shit. No one cares about how hard you work. So don't sacrifice your life for that.
Yeah, it's like wearing busy as a badge. A lot of people, it's like an honor thing. They want people to know that, but
it's like a virtue signal.
Yeah.
Like, and I think a lot of virtue signaling, this is the Nietzschean position, comes from a place of fear because you're acting contrary to your own interests for the sake of avoiding the censure of your peers. But let's say the case, like, let's provide an actual, go back to hating on Teslas. It'd be buying a Tesla even though you secretly really, really wanted a 488 Pista or something like that. Yeah, but it's the socially correct thing to have an electric car now. But to have, the nice V8 and all that, that's bad.
Why would I want that?
But I'm a good person because I got a Tesla.
Yeah.
But like, you can't really, ultimately you won't really be able to live with yourself because like, I'm a good person, but at what cost?
Yeah. And I think like it's, once again, that doesn't mean don't work hard. Don't work lots. Whatever.
It also doesn't mean go and rob people and do bad things. You know what I mean? But it's don't fall into these insipid displays of virtue signaling. And I see a lot of, in Australian culture, I see a lot of that now, is that everyone is so afraid to say anything out of line. And so conversations are very superficial and they avoid dangerous topics. It's other cultures engage with that at a far deeper level than we do. And we are PC to a degree that shocks me. I can't really engage with that frame. Like I for sure will piss those people off eventually. I try not to. It's just, being a realistic, pragmatic person. Yeah. You got to talk about certain things.
I think like we just lack the courage. Openness to have other, like, and also like we need definitely courage, but the people on the receiving end, then hopefully some reflection for them is like, you don't also have to agree. Like but it's being open to an opinion because it may have you thinking and seeing in the world in a different way.
I think also like the realm of contest has been sort of reduced to a feminine frame because a lot of your behavior is intermediated by gossip and shame and a verbal attack more so than anything else. And why would you be afraid of that as a man? Like, again, going back to what we were talking about before, like, don't be afraid to be, unpopular by saying certain things because sometimes people need you to say that. Like the old adage where it's like the truth will piss you off first, but then it will set you free. You got to step into that frame and just be strong in your convictions. People are terrified to hold a position on anything anymore. They're locked in perpetual fence sitting. As this. What? To appease who? Why?
Yeah.
Why do you care about what they have to say?
Well, I think part of also maybe that scare, the last few years probably initiated even more of that as well, as people have now discovered that they could be punished for those,
I think we saw
beliefs.
something truly unprecedented. Like, when have you ever seen the news turn on people and selectively other part of the population based on a choice?
It was like UVU. Well,
it's like
them versus them sort of things. Right?
I mean, they're demonizing people who chose not to take an experimental medicine, but in a way that was incredibly childish. Like, you're listening to the way that they're articulating their position, and these are politicians and supposed medical experts bashing the average citizen over the head. It's like, how dare you? What gave you the right to say that? And that is a real problem when you start othering people. That's when you invite atrocities, because
kind of like stepping on people.
You've siloed people off and you've demonized them, and then you remove protection from prosecution, like protection from unwarranted prosecution. And so this is what happened to, say, the Protestant community in France, the Huguenots, during the French Revolution. Catherine de Medici removed the legal protection for the community. And then the media whipped up a frenzy of, all this fanfare about inequality and all the rest of it. They were the productive class. They built all the most beautiful French architecture, some of the most beautiful buildings ever to exist. And suddenly all their protections were stripped away. The law no longer applied to them. And so it was open season, and anarchy reigned. And they were murdered in the streets. People were cooked on skillets. You had maids of aristocrats who were disemboweled in the street for doing nothing other than serving the aristocratic class. And it mobilized the worst instincts of people because they were othered. And you got to be very careful. Like, pick that up and make sure. I mean, I've got to be careful that I don't other people myself. There are plenty of Jewish people who are not, sort of part of what people are criticizing with what's going on. They need to tease that out, say, from the Zionist movement. It's not necessarily the same thing. They're two different, distinct groups. So you've got to be careful not to inflict collective punishment where it's unwarranted. And I think they set a terrible example doing that to the average person through COVID.
Yeah. Well, it was like, the danger of labeling someone as to who they are based on just one thing they did. Like, you are this person because of that. It's like,
I've dealt with that at a personal level, and you sort of forever prosecuted for something.
Yeah.
And it'll hurt you, until the end of your days, really. And that's the problem with the internet age, is you can't get away. I mean, maybe we should be held to our actions. That's just accountability, right?
Yeah.
That's just part of it. So sometimes you've got to own up to it. But again, there's an added domain here with the digital realm where it's very hard to build a new life and move forward because there's a permanent record. Yeah. There's a digital footprint.
You can try to delete it, but it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and this is what, again, something that people are aware of. It subtly drives me insane that they're consciously being monitored. You've got to police themselves. Like, the ultimate aim of censorship is get to your usual point where you start to moderate what you say. And the key to that is to leave what gets you censored unknown. So they don't define it. There's nowhere in the Facebook terms and conditions where you can find an expansive list of all things you can't say. So then you start censoring more than probably what you have to, so you don't get shadow banned.
Play safe.
So yeah. I mean, there are plenty of things that they can profile the kind of person you are. So if you are a white male of nationalistic pride, you're a problem. And there's a finger on the scale against whatever ideas you might share that fall into that category. It's categorical suppression. And it's not 100% suppression. It'd be like 50% on the scale. But in any kind of tussle for ideas, you only need to win at the periphery. So you only need to lean on the scale a little bit. You only need to censor, say, 5% of the voices. Or just limit the reach so that the other side has 60% of the ideation space. Yeah. So that their idea prevails and sets the consensus. So that's something that people need to be aware of. It's like, what consensus is being set and how.
I even noticed that they, even within itself, it's like, say, on a specific post, the comments that one person sees is different, like the top rating one. Yeah. So then you're like, like if you're an Andrew Tate lover, someone goes on and, he's the best, he's this, he's changed my life. But if you hate him, then you go on to the comments, then it's reinforcing why he's such a terrible human being. Yeah. And so you just continual reinforcement of your beliefs, generally pave to one side.
Well, you know why? It's because we tend to trust our peers more than authority now, as we should. So I often look to the comment section to see what people are saying.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you get someone out there just drop some little pearl of brilliance and they're like,
nice.
yeah, you know what I mean?
Enough said. I don't need to comment no more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So,
yeah, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, man. Like, it was a very beneficial conversation. I know a lot of blokes are going to walk away, and women too. Like, they'll still find a lot of value in that, because there's always two sides to understanding. Maybe if it's they're listening for their partner, but also all the other financial and beneficial advice around that as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, we could have gone for hours more, couldn't we? But thank you for having me on your show, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you for
having
me.
So.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Appreciate it.